Hey everybody, this is herculespetix, founder, curator, docent, and gift shop employee of the herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies. Today we're going to be looking at The New Frontier, number 1 through 3, a miniseries published by Dark Horse Comics in 1992. This is the work of John Sabljic and Michael Cherkas. They both wrote the story, came up with the story. John Sabljic did the script, and Michael Cherkas did the art. Michael Cherkas holds an interesting position, I think, in the comics world, where other than this Dark Horse miniseries, he was never published like by normal publishers, like mainstream and independent publishers in comics. But his stuff, he had some really high-profile gigs, like Heavy Metal Magazine. I mean, that was a choice gig back then, the highest page rates. And he was in it a lot with, I believe, with Larry Hancock. They were a team. Larry Hancock wrote the scripts. They had graphic novels from NBM, but they never just had like normal comics. And it seemed like none of their stuff made a splash at all, but they kept getting these, kind of nice gigs. So this is, as far as I know, this is the only like normal comic book size comic they ever, at least Cherkas ever did. I'm not sure if I've ever seen John Sabljic before. I always thought Michael Cherkas worked with Larry Hancock. Now that I think of it, these guys might have been in Cheval Noir, that other Dark Horse anthology. Let's check these out. Man, I really like Michael Cherkas' weird art. Nobody draws like this guy, as you can tell by the cover here and the pages within. So this takes place in a weird alternate reality. It's 1988. We meet Ace reporter, Ace Bailey, that's his name. He's kind of got this pal detective named Boyko. And this colleague of his, kind of a Lois Lane type, she's April. And he kind of gives us a little backstory. He's just reminiscing about November 22nd, 1963. In our world, that's when JFK was shot. But in this world, it's when Ruby Fields was committed suicide. Now, in this world, Ruby Fields... Actually, guys, before I continue, they do show us a few little differences in this world. Here's a baseball card of Fidel Castro. He hit a no-hitter in the World Series. That's actually could have been a true thing. Fidel Castro actually did try out for, I think, the Yankees before, he became Fidel Castro. He really liked baseball. The H-bombing of Pyongyang. Okay, sorry, getting back to Ruby Fields, guys. I just love alternate history stories, so I love finding those little differences. So he's reminiscing about how, that day when America found out Ruby Fields died was like 10 times more sad to America than JFK's death. Because in this world, Ruby Fields is kind of like a Marilyn Monroe analogy times 50. Imagine if every single person in America loved Marilyn Monroe more than anything. She was just a phenomena. Even like Joe Stalin would pine over her and tell reporters that he'd give up the whole dictatorship of the proletariat for one night with her. So after she died, her influence had never waned. Even though it's now, 26 years later, she's still as popular as ever. Her movies constantly show on TV. And she's still used to advertise things. She's on billboards, commercials. So just to show how, powerful her fame was. We learned a little backstory about her. So she was a, typical starlet story. She came from a small town. She went to Hollywood. But unlike most starlets, she was taken under the wing of Johnny Batuto, this gangster. And pretty soon, she started seeing the president, Jack. And I don't think they ever give us the last name of this president, but obviously he's a JFK analogy. the handsome young president. So after she died, just like JFK, there's all these like conspiracy theories. What really happened to Ruby? Some people think she was abducted by aliens. There's even a church has risen up, a cult called the Ruby Fields Church of the Millennium. They worship her. And of course, some people think that the government killed her. So the story takes place in Beacon City, and it's a city of 17 million people. America's megalopolis, the commercial and cultural capital, pretty much of the world. Some nice art there. As you have already seen, like Michael Cherkas just so many different faces and just crazy cartooning styles. He has this like one very identifiable style. But there's panels in here where all of a sudden I'm like, wait, that totally looks like another artist. Like this. So this is Ivor, and he's the mayor of Beacon City, but he's running for president. So our story really starts off here, where this woman, Molly something or other, she's a famous TV personality. She's found murdered. And we see Detective Boyko on the scene. And later on at this bar is going to be a main setting of this comic. It's owned by this guy, Steve. And he's kind of a big lug, Steve. And he's pretty friendly with Ace. We also meet Ace's girlfriend, Dusty Rhodes. So basically they find a suspect for the murder of Molly. He's this guy right here, Mr. Skinner. And he's basically a member of the Ruby Fields Church. He's a total wacko too. He's just rambling. But April, Ace's colleague, she doesn't think he did it. So she thinks there's some conspiracy afoot. And basically we see Ivor win. Look at the way he draws his face. These jowls are just amazing. See, sometimes I see like really weird raw Gilbert Hernandez in these panels. I see just all kinds of artists. And so basically, April's right. Ivor kind of knows that, Skinner didn't kill this woman. But he wants it to make him the patsy. Even if he's innocent, he doesn't care. So Ace is sent to Moscow for a little while, and then on assignment, he comes back, and we find out that Dusty wants to enter the Ruby Fields pageant. So they're so crazy about Ruby Fields that for the past 25 years, there's been a Ruby Fields pageant, which just the woman who looks most like Ruby wins. And I guess Dusty looks a lot like Ruby Fields. Next, we meet Ace's editor, Bolufsky. And this guy's totally corrupt. He's just he's not a real reporter. He's not a journalist. He just basically, he's a puppet. And the powers that be tell him what to print and what angle to take. And he basically will just write any propaganda they want. So Ace is constantly clashing with him. And basically he's just saying, shut up, Ace. Don't rock the boat. April's a real journalist, and she won't let it go. Even though Bolufsky tells her not to. Keep pursuing this. She gets a call from the DA's assistant. And, what's his name? This doesn't really matter. He's the DA's assistant. And he basically wants to be a whistleblower. She talks to Skinner. And then she has a meeting with Ace about the information she learned. So we find out that Steve, the bartender, actually used to work for Johnny Batuta. And he actually was involved with Ruby Fields at one point. Oh, also, I think he used to be a boxer. So the whistleblower, he's rifling through the DA's files, his boss's files, and the boss catches him. And it looks like he's going to beat the crap out of him. April runs in the room and says, "You can't let an innocent man die." And he basically just says, "Lady, I've heard your crackpot theories. This guy's guilty. We're going to fry him. We're going to send him to the chair." So many great faces in here. I really like his cartooning. Cherkas. So both April and Ace are separately pursuing this vast conspiracy, try to prove what the hell's going on. Some other great pictures of Ivor Wynn. Such a weird design. I love it. Looks like a weird bulldog. This almost looks like Archie, like Dan DiCarlo. So basically, Ivor Wynn tells the DA, he says, "You got to kill that kid, that whistleblower." He's like, "I've never killed anyone before." It's like, "Well, you're going to do it now." And he does. And so Ace is sent to cover the execution of Skinner. And meanwhile, when April gets in her car, the DA's there with a gun. And he's just ranting to her. And he blows his brains out. He couldn't take the guilt. Look at this face. This is like Dick Tracy, like Chester Gould. That's some weird stuff. I love his blacks, too, his inking. I mean, this is some chunky, nice, solid inks. I think this guy's totally got skills, but his style is just too idiosyncratic. I'm sure this turns off a lot of people, but I think it turned off me when I was a kid, but I love it now. I think it's great. Once again, Ace is given his editor-in-chief grief. He finds this letter on his desk, which basically is like, thanks for lying for us. So he's taking bribes. He's a totally corrupt editor. And so we find out at the end of this issue that Dusty won the regional round of the Ruby Fields pageant, and she's headed to Kalamazoo for the Nationals. And I guess Ace is going to go with her. Here we have a fake ad for Manifest Destiny trading cards. And these trading cards depict all of America's greatest imperial victories over other countries. Some of them are real, that happened in our world, but then some of them are just like made up. You know, the second sack of Toronto, 1990. Yeah, in this reality, Canada's communist, and they're our great enemy. Number 2, very odd cover. I really like the design of these. He really fits the content of this. So they're in Kalamazoo for the Ruby Fields pageant. Something else about this world is kind of interesting. It's very like retro. It's very like, even though it's 1988 and there's flying cars and dirigibles, but it does seem to have this 50s American-ness to it. You know, like they're always talking about the Bolsheviks, and the Bolsheviks were behind Ruby Fields' murder. And just the fashions. So April is in Kalamazoo to cover the event as a reporter. Ace is just there to support Dusty, his girlfriend. God, just such solid cartooning. Just love this guy. So from this scene, it's another scene that depicts like Ace is he's a pretty shitty boyfriend. I didn't even mention he's always hitting on April, his colleague, and she always rebuffs him. And you know, Dusty, his girlfriend, is so devoted to him. She's really in love with him. And every time she says anything, he's just like ignoring her. He just basically treats her like a cock holster. He doesn't really seem to have any respect for her as a human being. But I like to see here he's ignoring her he's reading Herman the German by A. Hitler. In this reality, Adolf Hitler is still alive, and he's a citizen of Soviet Russia. And he's also the world's most beloved cartoonist with Herman the German comic strip. I would love to read that comic strip. So it's the night of the pageant, and Dusty's kind of cocky and confident that she's going to win, but she doesn't. This dark horse contestant at the last minute, nobody even knew who she was until a week ago, is this woman, Sandy Shores, and she wins. And everyone's amazed. She looks exactly like Ruby Fields. She's a last-minute entrant, and she totally wins, hands down. Once again, look at the style there. That looks like Fiona Smith or something. It's totally different than a lot of this art. So this is back at the apartment or their hotel room. And, you know, Dusty's furious that she lost. So it seems like she's getting more unhinged. She's starting to think, or making herself think, that she really is Ruby Fields. And she takes all these pills. So they go to this party, basically crash it. She's like, I'm going to go because I'm the real Ruby Fields. And April's there. And she just collapses, probably from the drugs and drinking some. And this shows what a dick Ace is. She doesn't even look. She just falls to the ground. And Ace is all like, oh, looks like it's just you and me, April. Like, he doesn't even look after her. I think he just walks away from her prone form on the floor. So now we see an interesting development here. Ivor comes down to join the party, and all of a sudden, he's all attached at the hip with Sandy Shores, the winner. And they're just totally buddy-buddy. And of course, everyone's all like, what the hell? Why is she hanging out with that guy? Oh, man. Just so much great black ink on this page. So Ace finally returns to see how Dusty's doing. She wakes up from her stupor. Looking so sad. And she's just telling everyone she's Ruby Fields. She's really going around the bend there. So Ace gets a telegram from Sandy Shores to fly out to LA so he can interview her. He goes to her mansion. It's quite swank. And she really doesn't want to give an interview. That's not the real reason. It looks like she just wanted to seduce him, which she does after a few drinks. And I don't know if she slipped him a Mickey or something, but everything gets a little wobbly. And he's just hearing her voice. And then the next morning he wakes up kind of all hungover and in a stupor. And he sees a wig on the floor, a blonde wig. And when he goes in the bathroom, he sees Sandy Shore shaving. So we find out Sandy Shore is a dude. A dude who looks like a lady. And so Ivor Wynne begins his presidential campaign in earnest. And of course, Ace's newspaper writes a glowing recommendation because the powers that be told them to. It's total propaganda. That's a nice page right there. I like all these pages, actually. So it's so interesting. Everyone hates Ivor Wynne. They go to his rallies, and they basically just want to see Sandy. They're just yelling at him. They're like, "Get off the stage, you fat slob. We want Sandy." And as soon as Sandy goes out, they go crazy. And his poll numbers keep rising because of this. So it's like people hate him, but they're basically voting for Sandy Shore by proxy. Look at these mutants in the crowd. I love this. It's almost like they like Sandy Shore as much as Ruby Fields. She also pretty soon just starts thinking she's Ruby Fields. I think cartoonists call that, spotting blacks? Like if you blur your eyes, every page is so well balanced with all the, bits of black here and there. It just really just looks so nice to me. So we see Sandy. Sandy. I keep mixing up the two lookalikes. Sandy and Ivor. And we basically find out that she's backing Ivor because the main thing, she wants him to become president so she can bring Ruby Fields' killers to justice. And Ivor seems a little nervous about that. He'll start sweating. So here we meet Mr. Castlefield. So in this world, even more so than our own world, Mr. Castlefield owns the biggest corporation in the world. And in this world, they totally control everything. He literally just picks the president he wants. And that's how powerful he is. So just more intrigue here. The presidential campaign's heating up. Ivor's doing the incumbent. He's catching up to the incumbent. I think his name's Hicks, this guy. And we see Hicks, the president of the United States, with not Mr. Castlefield himself, his assistant, Tweed. And Tweed is just like treating him like dirt. That's how powerful, Castle Core is. See another scene of Ace giving his editor shit for being a sellout. So Ivor Wynne has got to see Tweed. And Tweed's like, "What the hell do you think you're doing? You're not going to win. You're not the guy Mr. Castlefield wants. So you're an idiot." And just to seal the deal, he says, "Oh yeah, we have this picture of you." I don't know if you can see this, guys, but he's on his hands and knees in fishnet stockings, and some woman is riding him with a whip, a crop. And Tweed says they're releasing that to the newspapers tomorrow to bury him. It comes out, everyone's shocked, but then Sandy Shore comes on TV and just gives this earnest plea in defense of Ivor Wynne and says, "Please, he's a warm, generous man. Please vote for him, and we'll finally find out who killed Ruby Fields." And it works. That's how much people love Sandy. His win defeats the president, the incumbent, even though everyone hates him. And so we see we're back at the bar, Steve's bar, and Ace and April are talking to this guy. Seems to know the score. I don't know if he's an informant or something, but he's all like, oh yeah, Ivor's not going to like that. He doesn't want to look into the death of Ruby Fields. And he kind of, doesn't really tell us why, but I think you can kind of suspect why. Oh, I forgot to mention, here's another fake ad. This is for the Ruby Fields amulet, which will, make your hair grow back if you're bald. And it'll even help left-handedness. I like the design of these comics. They're nice. Dark Horse did a good job. Here's the third and last issue. Look at this art. It's just crazy. I mean, no wonder this didn't sell well. I'm sure most typical Dark Horse fans were like, wow, what the hell am I looking at? This isn't Chris Warner. And so it looks like Ivor's on his way to win the presidency. Man, I just love how these pages look. And then we're introduced to Steve. Steve has a little helper. This guy, Riley. He's kind of unhinged. He's kind of a kook. And the next day, news comes down that Steve was shot. Someone went into the bar, shot him, didn't take anything from the safe, but rifled through his office. Turns out it was Riley. Turns out also that Riley's a member of the Ruby Fields Church. We see Ace and Dusty hanging out. Dusty's really just getting really into this Ruby Fields thing. Just trying out all these outfits from all of her movies. Asking that Ace call her Ruby all the time. So I guess Riley, the detectives, the police force get a call from someone up above, and they're like, release that Riley guy. And they got no choice, even though he's guilty. Because they all, work for the man. And so as soon as Riley's free, he collects these photos. Look at this panel. It looks totally different. It's almost like, what's that guy's name? Craig Thompson? With a little Will Eisner thrown in. It's so weird how some of these panels are just, Michael Cherkas is just trying something new. And so, back to the story, Riley takes these photos to Ivor Wynn's hotel. And basically, he's such a fanatic, Ruby Fields fan, he does it just so he can hand them personally to Sandy Shores. And Ivor says, yes, let yourself in. You can hand them to her yourself. And when he walks in, he catches Sandy, with her 5 o'clock shadow, or his 5 o'clock shadow. And, he can tell that it's a dude. And so he freaks out. And the next day, the Ruby Fields Church says that the one true Ruby now is Dusty Rhodes. Sandy doesn't care, though. So Wynn's thugs kill Riley after he, basically squealed to the church that something wasn't kosher about Sandy. I like the faces in this crowd too. So all over the place. There's a little Jaime Hernandez in that one. So basically, Dusty breaks up with Ace because Ace is constantly just trying to give her a reality check. You know, he refuses to call her Ruby all the time, and he tries to be like, "You're not Ruby Fields, come on," and she just says, "Fuck you. I'm gonna go have a date with Ivor Wynn right now." Ace doesn't seem that sad about it. So there's a big party, celebratory party for Ivor, and Del Shannon's playing in the Big Bopper. I guess they're still alive and popular in 1988. We see Castlefield basically complaining to Tweed that he's like, "Oh, I hate that Ivor Wynn. I'm so annoyed that he's going to be president." So even though he can really sway the electorate, he is, because this wild card of having Sandy Shore back him up, he just can't go against the tide of public opinion. So, but of course, he's still going to be holding the strings. He's still going to control them. So back in Ivor's room, Sandy, we find out that she's the son, the illegitimate son of Ruby Fields and President Jack. And she finally confronts Ivor. She's kind of grown to suspect. God, look at the jowls there, the way they're so drawn, so almost abstract art. So she kind of confronts him and just says she knows that like Ivor had something to do with her mom's death. She's not quite sure though. We see President Jack, who's still alive. He's a total vegetable in this weird, bizarre wheelchair that looks like a bathtub. And he wants to see his son really bad. But of course, Mr. Castlefield, who controls everything, just says, "Have you forgotten our agreement, Mr. President?" And back to Ace. Ace, I guess, had a little bit too much to drink. Boyko wakes him up. And all of a sudden, Ace is like, "I've got to go to the Wynn Gala. I want to see Dusty." Back to Ivor. Sandy shows her the evidence to Ivor, and he realizes she's onto him. And she tells him the whole story. How, you know, Jack became obsessed with Ruby Fields, and they started an affair, and she had a baby from this affair, and they took the baby away. And basically Ivor, acting as like within the government, just went on his own, knew that he had to kill Ruby Fields. She was a threat to national security. He didn't want her to bring down his president. So he raised the son like a foster father. And now he says, "I love you, Sandy, but I can't let you ruin my chance for glory." And he kills her. And he instantly regrets it. He says, "What have I done?" He calls up Mr. Tweed. And of course, Mr. Tweed takes care of it, because that's what he does. And even though he's a little late, he shows up at the gala with Dusty Rhodes on his arm. So everyone thinks it's Sandy Shore, because they look just like Ruby Fields. Just another sharp-looking page with all this beautiful black. And that's how this part of the story ends. Then we see Ace, and I guess we jump ahead a little. He says, shortly after Wynn's victory during the inauguration day, in between that time, basically, all of a sudden, Ace was fired from the newspaper he worked for and totally blacklisted. So now that Wynn's in power, he's not going to put up with Ace Bailey anymore. So Ace is sitting around Steve's bar. Oh, I'm sorry, he actually got a job there. Steve was the only one who'd hire him as a bartender. Steve is still kind of lost a lot of mental acuity after he was shot by his helper. So he's kind of a vegetable. So Steve works for him, takes care of the bar. And they're sitting around watching the inauguration speech on this crazy TV, fake retro TV. And these two giant government goons come in and grab Ace. They take him out to this flying car. And who should it be inside? It's Dusty. And she says, basically, Ivor wants you to be his press secretary. He'd rather have you working for him than against him. And basically, you're going to be rich. You're going to have a huge staff, your own office. And it looks like Dusty's still crazy about him. So it looks like Ace is totally going to happily sell out at the end, and get to be with Dusty, who he never seemed to be that happy with in the first place. But it seems like Ace is a pretty shallow guy where, that'll do. Here's another fake ad for 201-piece Operation Bay of Pigs toy soldier set. Here's what you get. 4 CIA men dressed as tourists from Iowa, 20 American GIs, 2 Soviet tourists in swimming trunks, 4 KGB agents dressed as tourists from Iowa, 7 mafia hitmen, 10 mambo musicians. That made me laugh. Oh, that would be a fun toy to play with. So there you have it, guys. New Frontier number 1 through 3. Man, I love this stuff. And I remember I have those heavy metals. I think they had at least, Hancock and Cherkas had at least one serial in heavy metal. I think 2 even, throughout the 80s. And what was their thing? I think they had a thing from NBM called Suburban Nightmares. These were a series of graphic novels. I really want to hunt them down. Because rereading this again, I realized I really like Cherkas. And I think I just kind of thought he was interesting when I was younger. At first, I didn't like him at all. Then I just thought it was like, oh, what an interesting style. But now I'm crazy about it. It's so pleasing to the eye. His amazing layouts and compositions. So hope you guys like looking at it. And I hope to see you here next time at the the Herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies.